Hi everyone. We're just letting people in. Start in about 1 minute. Okay, great. It's 2 minutes after, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for some of you. Thank you for attending. Welcome to today's CMO Executive Forum, which is created exclusively for CMOs and senior marketing leaders like yourselves. And today we'll be discussing the changing behaviors of boomers due to the pandemic and the implications for marketers as we head into the new year. So I'm Meg Wubenhorst. Very nice to meet you. I work within the CMO Master Circle group at the ANA. And if you're watching this private webinar, you are a part of our community along with 1,400 other senior marketing leaders. So here at the ANA, our North Star is this growth agenda that you're seeing in front of you. We call it affectionately the wheel, and it's a framework of our strategic priorities for the industry. So first we have brand, which is revolutionizing modern marketing in a brands for humans ethos, which is really looking deeper within the data for those core human insights. Data, which is driving transparency and harnessing the power of technology for good and for growth. Talent, which is developing high-performing, diverse talent at all levels and working with academia to marketing to the next generation. And then, of course, society and sustainability, which is really the heart, and creating positive impact on society in a way that drives growth. So in order to drive these priorities forward, we created a Global CMO Growth Council, of which you're part of, and these workshops and executive forums are part of the content we deliver to you. But these teams of CMOs and industry leaders are working together to accelerate global economic and societal growth. So on October 19th, just to give you a brief background, on October 19th, some of you may have attended our CMO Summit. We had over 300 CMOs there. We shared actionable plans with the objective of creating incremental growth opportunities for you, your companies, and the industry at large. And we'd love for you to be more involved. So as a senior leader, you have two opportunities to participate. The first is to join one of the CMO Growth Council working teams. Again, that's brand, data, society and sustainability, and talent. So if you want to join, if you're not already part of one, you can go to our website at anamastercircle.com and reach out to us or one of the emails we send you. And the other is to join our Global CMO Exchange that we just launched. And this is by CMOs for CMOs. And what it is a resource list of over 100 CMOs and growing who have volunteered to share their areas of expertise in order to help other CMOs on a one-to-one basis. So we'd love for you to offer your time and expertise. We've got about 30 categories that you can sign up for, anything from influencer marketing to data and insights to experiential marketing. Of course, there's 30 and I can't think of more than two. But if you'd like to be involved, please reach out to us at ANA masters-circle@ana.net. And contact us and be a part of it. So for today's session, we encourage interactive questions. You can interrupt at will if you have a question. Please post it in the Q&A so that I can unmute you and let you talk to Kyle directly. And we'll also be recording today to share for later, and we'll share this deck as well. So I'd like to introduce you to your speaker for today, once called the Doogie Howser of polling. Dr. Kyle Dropp is the co-founder and president of Morning Consult, which is a global data intelligence company. In case you didn't know, they deliver insights on what people think in real time. And Kyle, just an interesting thing about him other than Doogie Howser, he gained notoriety with his 2015 landmark theory before we were really talking about it, the shy Trump voters, which became a fundamental concept of the 2016 elections and 2020, and led Business Insider to call Morning Consult the breakout company who broke the dam in 2016 polling. So without further ado, Kyle, take it away.
Hey, Meg, thanks so much. And I'm grateful to be here. And like Meg said, I think anytime throughout this presentation, if you have questions or thoughts or comments or ideas, just include them in the Q&A. So I'm grateful to the entire ANA team and the community here. And I'm hoping that the next 45 minutes or so will just be riveting, informative, interactive, you name it. Here's, I guess, pre-pandemic, a lot has changed. I used to wear suits and I got glasses. So, I do look a little bit different now in normal times, but I'm here to share more information about the state of baby boomers today in the US and globally. I thought I would start by showing 4 kind of key takeaways, and then we're going to do a poll. I'm going to show some content and we'll pause again and we'll kind of repeat that, I think, with questions throughout the hour. So in looking at millions of interviews around the world, also focusing on the US, we found 4 things that'll come up a bunch in this presentation. So baby boomers are generally less comfortable than younger adults in returning to all ranges of leisure and different activities. You'll see this in a few minutes. Second, they've seen larger declines in confidence and spending throughout the pandemic. That'll be a key question as we're thinking about the path to return and what will stick. Third, the pandemic has opened the door to behaviors baby boomers hadn't otherwise considered. I wouldn't say the door is wide open, but it's been cracked open for different types of e-commerce and other digital activities, whether that's in healthcare, food delivery, you name it. And finally, unlike other generations, however, the pandemic is not the formative event in their lives. I'm going to share a little bit more about that, and that'll make sense in a couple moments. But Meg, I think you have a polling question to engage the audience before we start setting the scene. And I was hoping that the audience right now could share their answers to a simple 1-word or 1-line question. How important would you say boomer customers are to your company? So if you could answer kind of very, somewhat, not very, or not important at all, maybe we'll share the results in a couple minutes, Meg, you think?
Sounds good.
Okay, well, without that, while you're answering that, I'm just going to jump right in because I think that's the best sort of presentation that we could give. So what do we have in store for you? Well, we're going to talk about the impact on consumer comfort and hobbies that COVID has had. We're going to talk about the impact on consumer spending. We're going to talk about some behaviors that may or may not stick post-pandemic. And we're going to talk about sort of some top brands globally. And note that I'm going to integrate a lot of our US data with a lot of our global information too. As Meg sort of said at the top of the hour, we're interviewing about 30,000 people every day on all sorts of topics. So anything we can do to get information in real time, we're here for it. So if I set the scene really rapidly, here's where I would start. So 72 million Americans right now are boomers. The way we define them is, adults born between 1946 and 64 in the United States. When I show international comparisons, I'll usually look at adults who are in that age group or perhaps 55 plus. This 72 million number, for example, compares with an identical number, 72 million millennials, 67 million Gen Z, and 65 million Gen X. So about 4 equivalent sized generations when you're looking here. One thing worth noting for any of the financial services attendees, 60% of total wealth is held by boomers. I know we've done a lot of work on retail investors and the rise of different financial products, but wow, a lot of the wealth is still held by baby boomers, and it'll be fascinating to see how they're spending that, how it might be transferred to future generations in the future, and I'll bring that up in a moment. And then third, a more global comparison. So currently about 9% of the population are seniors around the world, but that number is going to double between now and 2050. And I'm sure folks who are in healthcare or in any, frankly, industry, technology, will be having to consider that as the population ages in a lot of specifically developed countries. Okay, so a couple findings that I'm just going to start with. So just for your context, when I show global findings, in many cases, I'll be showing findings across all of these green countries. These are countries where we're doing daily tracking and regular omnibus work. In the yellow countries, these are countries where we're doing some ad hoc type work. There's about 85 where we're doing different survey results. So I'm going to jump back and forth a little bit in between some of our key US results among that boomer audience and globally. So let me just jump right in. So the first thing I'll mention is that consumer confidence, as measured by a simple index that asks people if now's a good time to make major purchases, if people think they'll be better off in a year, if people think they're better off today compared with a year ago, has declined significantly globally among the baby boomer age grouping. So if I go sort of left to right, in the green, 100 is neutral. So that means that as many people say positive things as people say negative things about the state of the economy. So if you look before the pandemic, we're at about 98 overall, just as an index among all adults. And now that's gone down about 14 points from 1 year ago to today. If you were to look at baby boomers, they've gone down 16 points. So both percentage-wise and number-wise, quite large, much larger than Gen Z, which is generally more optimistic about the state of the economy, and you name it. I would also highlight that these declines in consumer confidence are not the same in every country. This 78 number, for example, by comparison, it's 64 in Japan. It's 64 in Canada. It's 76 in Australia. It's in the 80s in Mexico. So dramatic and lower levels of consumer confidence among the boomer generation that will be apparent in a lot of the work that I'll show on consumer spending in just a moment. I would say another brand-related consideration worth noting, we track about 1,500 brands in the United States, and I'm going to show a lot of info that indicates that trends and hobbies have maybe not changed as much among boomers as among other generations. And one reason is that many boomers already know a lot about brands and have experienced them throughout their life. So what this slide shows is the number of brands that we track where there's near universal name ID. 90% plus people are aware. So it shows that about 600 brands of the 1,500 that we track in the US each day have 90% plus name ID among boomers. They're well known. They've been using them for quite some time. It's really hard to change somebody's mind on something if they've known it for their whole life. By contrast, Gen Z, those adults who are about 23 and younger, only about 100 or so brands have that same 90% plus level of awareness. So this will come through as we're talking about what is the impact of COVID-19 on views toward brands, on growth of brands, on other affinity. And the other thing that I think I will mention in terms of kind of teasing or setting the scene would be just the really high levels of concern about COVID-19 among the boomer population, the 55 plus population. So 80% plus in recent surveys across Europe say that they're very or somewhat concerned about COVID-19. The numbers on just about every COVID-related question in terms of concern are going to be higher among older adult populations. And I know that that has big consequences when it comes to health. Hey, Meg, I was going to show, before talking a little bit about consumer comfort and hobbies, I was wondering if we could share the results to the very important poll, if you have that up and easy and readily available to share.
Absolutely. So not surprisingly, very important was the leader. You wouldn't be here if not.
Yeah, I'll even put that up here if you can maybe see it. Wow. All right. 70% very important, only 28% somewhat important. Not even a single person said not important at all. Okay. Well, I think I'll show one more section and then I'll pause to see if anybody has questions of any sort. So this section, we're going to focus on the impact of COVID-19 and frankly, this whole year on a wide range of hobbies and other sort of consumer comfort measures. So going back to the start of the year, each week we've been asking adults whether they're comfortable engaging in a wide range of leisure activities. So each of these figures, for example, shows the percent of people who say they would be comfortable engaging in a specific activity, and it's each week. So for example, in green, you see a big increase in comfort in the spring when COVID cases generally declined in the United States, followed by about a flat line. What's apparent in these 6 figures, whether it's talking about going out to eat, going on vacation, going to the gym, going to the movies, is that the gap between younger generations, millennials, and boomers has expanded. This gap today is almost always bigger than what it was in April. So I think this is potentially troubling for a lot of reasons, just as we're thinking about comfort, safety, other measures. Now, this is United States data. Yeah, Meg, go ahead.
I'm so sorry. I have a question.
Oh, yeah.
We're gonna move off this slide. Do you project that it's going to continue dropping for baby boomers as we have a second round of COVID?
I would anticipate, yeah, I would expect that this number is going to keep dropping. If you look from the publicly available data on either case counts or hospitalizations or even deaths, all of those numbers are going up. And with cold weather ahead of us, you would certainly expect that to be the case. Everything we have seen has suggested that concern about COVID, the amount of information people are consuming with respect to vaccines is a lot higher among older adults than younger adults. So I would anticipate that this green number, the baby boomer numbers, would go down. If anything, you would expect probably a decline among all groups, especially as there's renewed lockdowns.
We've got a question from Shailene Weber.
Hi, I'm not on video, but I'm just looking at this, and also being a baby boomer, fitting your demographic, or my husband, I should say, not me. But anyway, what if they just don't want to do these things? They've just you know what? I've made such a nice home for myself, and I figured out how to do the streaming on absolutely everything. So I don't even need to go to a movie, because I might have to take a lot of bathroom breaks now, and it's easier to pause. Going to the gym, I just went ahead and bought a Peloton, and outfit my home. So going to the gym, economically, I'm fine. So is there an overlay to these figures that is actual economics?
Yeah, I have some figures probably in two sections that will show just general levels of purchase or interest in all sorts of activities along these lines. And there is no doubt that, younger adults might be more, interested in socializing in general or going out in general than, say, baby boomers. So some of that does intersect here. And so maybe I can show you that figure in just a couple minutes. And then if it doesn't answer the question, I can jump into it more even, but I really appreciate it.
Probably not looking for a definitive answer, but just, wondering about the data, because the other things that I would like going to play a round of golf. I mean, heck, that's going to be, that's going to be very high.
Yeah, exactly. We have a slide too, let's say 10 slides from now, where it's
awesome. Okay.
Past about 28 activities and whether people miss them or not. Everything from going to the theater or movies. I don't want to give away the result though.
Thanks. I'm going to unmute myself again, Meg. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Next
Meg,
up is Mike Siegel. Mike Siegel.
Thanks, Meg. Kyle, I think you're going to get ahead. I may be getting ahead of you, because I had a question also about participation in organized group activities. So people who might not just a movie theater, but more attend a live event or participate in a 5K, things where groups of people would naturally be forced together, not opportunistically. So if you're getting to that, please just say so. But if you have perspectives on that are not in this presentation, please let me know.
Yeah, and we have a feed that updates live. You may be able to see this here, but for the benefit of the audience, I only showed a couple of the bins, but we have some more group activities, whether it's going to a concert or an amusement park, and then I think in a couple slides I'll have some more information on exercise classes and some other things. But note that every day we're putting work in the field, so we could in a very straightforward fashion measure this among that key baby boomer audience.
Great, thank you.
Of course. Meg, any other questions, or should I show a couple more slides?
Go on.
Okay, these are the trends as they exist in the United States, but we're regularly mapping this in lots of other countries too. And there's not a perfect relationship, but I would say that for the vast majority of these activities, boomers are less comfortable engaging in them. The figure here shows comfort with going to a restaurant or cafe in the next 2 weeks. And this green bar is all adults, and the blue bar is 55 plus. And so there's two things that really jump out at me in this figure. One is higher levels of comfort in places like Australia and the United States compared with Europe. But then two, generally boomers are lower than all adults, 24 versus 20, half in France, 16 or 12 versus 6, 11 versus 7. Now, I could show this for probably 10 other activities, and the figure will look effectively the same. So in general, comfort is decidedly lower among kind of the baby boomer and older generation. And I think there are a couple of reasons why that is the case, and we can talk about those in a moment. I did mention at the top that the door has been cracked open for new types of experiences among boomers, and I'll talk a little bit about that here. We had a unique question that may surprise some people that we asked people since the coronavirus outbreak, quote, I have discovered new hobbies or pastimes that I plan to continue even after stay-at-home and social distancing measures end. And you know what? This slide to me was quite intriguing. About 70% of Gen Z said they're adopting new hobbies, and only about 25% of boomers said as much. I would be curious for the audience's take on why this might be the case, but certainly, my parents are in the boomer generation. They have a pretty good understanding of what they like doing and don't like doing. And, certainly when I try to tell them to do something new, sometimes they're kicking and screaming to do it. Whereas, somebody in the Gen Z generation might be, let's say, more open to all sorts of considerations. However, that door is opening a little bit. For example, I'm going to show how Black Friday is so much different today among baby boomers than it was just a year ago. This figure, for example, shows that baby boomers, right here, this bottom line, are the least comfortable generation in terms of shopping online. We've probably got 50 unique or distinct studies on holiday shopping. So I'm just showing a snippet here, but about 30%, for example, said they plan on shopping online. About 6% said they planned on shopping in the stores. That 27 to 6 ratio is actually a higher ratio of online to in-store than anybody else. So that one really stood out to me as kind of, I think, being potentially definitive. And this also applies to when we ask people how interested they are in shopping in all sorts of different locations. There's a couple places I would also say where we're seeing big rises. If I look now, this is seniors and 45 to 64-year-olds. On online banking and financial services, we're seeing some big changes here. We asked a simple question about what would you be most comfortable doing when it comes to a financial transaction? Okay, so all adults said only about 13% said they'd want to go to a bank. About 20% said a drive-through. About 20% said an ATM. About 40% said mobile banking. Now, if I zoom all the way to the bottom here, about 30% of seniors say that they're most comfortable with mobile or online banking. Who would have thought that a decade ago? Well, now you're up there, and again, boomers, the cutoff's usually around 55. So if you kind of join the bottom two bars, you're looking at a non-trivial population here. There are some places where it hasn't jumped up, and Meg, I'll pause too if there's any questions, but boomers have not jumped on the meal delivery wave, I guess, is to use a less than precise term. We asked that same question about banking as we did for how you want to order food. And if you look here, kind of the same sort of similar arrangement overall, and then by age groups, about 34% of adults overall said, use a drive-through to pick up food. About 16% said outside, 10% said carry out, 17% said delivery from the restaurant, 12% here, a lot of growth from Uber Eats, Postmates, DoorDash, and Grubhub. But that 12% here is only 3% for age 65 plus. It's a little higher for 45 to 64, but meal delivery is a wave that I think there's a lot of opportunity for growth here. Another one that certainly is on people's minds. Well, maybe I'll pause here. Meg, were there any other questions before I keep going?
I know there's some between the financial slide and this meal delivery slide. I know there's some folks on the webinar who are CMOs or senior marketing leaders of these verticals. I think pointing out here, as you might, that the drive-through and picking up food is due to napkin math, I think seniors are the highest. Is that because they've are those new behaviors that they've adopted, or were they always kind of leading in that area?
Well, I think, as you know, COVID-19 has transformed a lot of parts of life. If you look at a lot of, we partner with a lot of the QSR organizations and other restaurants, and they've, of course, seen dramatic growth when it comes to drive-through operations. And so I would say that it's principally grown by some combination of not wanting to go inside the actual establishment, and kind of the drive-through, being an available place and responding in a positive way to consumers' demands. We see consumers want both consumers to be required to wear masks when they go through a drive-through, but they want masks of employees. They want additional safety procedures. So yeah, it's a good point, Meg, to point out that, yeah, the drive-through world, I think, is growing, and I'd be curious to hear from the crowd whether they think that that's something that's going to stick when we get back to the sort of new normal.
Laura Eddy had a question. Go ahead, Laura.
Hello. Actually, this is I was a little late. Sorry, I typed slow. Curious if there was maybe a difference in things that were potentially specifically called out in some of the government mandates. So the thing that sort of came to mind was like religious services were something that, were specifically talked about. Was there more acceptance or, like more willingness to do things like that, or, potentially even regionally driven, sort of behavior, where there's more interest in like, that's something where you go to be social, et cetera. Just curious if you saw any cuts along or breaks along those lines.
That's a really good question. Off the top of my head, I don't know. My intuition would be that there is some higher levels of comfort because the nuns and knots and agnostics tend to be more concentrated among younger adults, the folks who are maybe not going to religious services quite as much. But Laura, let me follow up with the specific numbers for you. And I think we may have a snippet on church attendance a little bit later in the presentation. Maybe I'll show two more figures, Meg, and then we could deploy the second poll question. And then I've got a couple more, I think, really neat sections. So we looked at drive-through considerations for mobile banking. We looked at them for food purchases. We also asked this exact same questions when it comes to picking up prescriptions in a way that I thought was quite unique. About 40% of seniors said they'd prefer to pick up their prescriptions in person in the store. About 30% said drive-through, and fully 15% actually said on some form of app, like a DoorDash or a delivery type consideration. So really interesting to see shifts there. There are a few places where we haven't seen as much adoption from seniors. And I think this is something that comes up with a lot of sports viewing audiences and you name it. But only about 1 in 8 seniors has subscribed to a new streaming service throughout the pandemic. And that's considerably lower than a lot of other generations. Just going back here, about 3 in 10, for example, Gen Z adults, about 3 in 10 millennials, in fact, say that they've signed up for a new streaming service, whether that's anything from Hulu to Tubi to Disney Plus, to you name it. So again, the door's a little bit cracked open, but it's not wide open. I do know that there's, I think, a lot of health members on here and a lot of health interest. So we've been asking a lot of questions about comfort with new ways of delivering services and getting services. I was surprised and perhaps a bit impressed to see that on a simple question about how comfortable are you with telemedicine and other telemedicine services, fully half of seniors, 47% in particular, said that they would be comfortable with it, which I think is a pretty good and pretty high number. Once you get exposed to it and you think about all the things that you need to do to go in person, that's probably something that is increasingly here to stay. Meg, would we be able to deploy the second poll question? Because I think that really integrates with some of our future work on consumer spending.
Absolutely.
Okay, so this question is trying to gauge whether you think the activities and hobbies boomers have engaged in during the pandemic will stick, or whether people will sort of return back to normal, I suppose. It looks like we're getting a lot of good questions as well, which is great. So I'm just going to go through this section, Meg, and then maybe I'll pause after 3 slides or so and see if there's any feedback or questions. So as I mentioned at the top, there's just been a dramatic change, I think, in consumer spending among boomers. I think they're holding on to their assets and resources in a way that we aren't seeing. I'm going to go from kind of one country to macro to category type spending. So if I wanted to zoom in, from a recent study in France, we did a lot of work that shows French boomers have reduced spending on just about all categories. So if I start on the left, this is thinking about entertainment. Are you spending more or less? So all adults, 11-35. So a lot say they're spending less just overall. But look at this gap for 55 plus, 3 versus 43, a 40-point divide, whereas younger adults are just about the same, 21, 22. And then if I go on the right-hand side, thinking about shopping and clothes spending, lower 7-44 overall, but even lower, even bigger gap, a 43-point net difference. Only 3% of baby boomers in that age cohort say that they're in fact spending more on clothes and shopping, which I think really stood out. If you look, and I guess a theme that will come up a couple times over the next few slides, here's a 6-country study that we just implemented. And we asked a pretty straightforward question, are you generally spending more than usual, about the same, or much less? I would highlight that the red parts, the percent spending less than usual, is considerably higher among boomers or 55 plus in every single country compared with all adults overall across the UK, across Spain, across France, across Italy, across Germany. And we can follow up with any specific crosstabs or additional metrics that might be of note. This is one of my favorite figures because I think it gets at more of a category level. And I'm going to walk through this a bit. But we talked to a couple thousand Americans nationally, and we asked them a question. Are you currently purchasing more, purchasing less, which is red, or is there no change in how much you purchased? Or frankly, have you never purchased anything overall? I think it's worth kind of pausing on this one for a few moments because I think it's so important. So I guess I would highlight a few things. One, there's a few categories where there are big declines in spending. Beauty services, about half of boomers say they're spending less. Clothing, as I noted, kind of in that French study not that long ago. Electronics, a little bit more than 22%. Then there's a few categories where people are spending more. Healthy food, snack or junk food, kind of both, food in general, that'll come up a bit in the future, and personal care products, this second one from the bottom. I would highlight that if you compare boomer habits with all adults, the yellow bar for boomers is about 10 points bigger than, that is the no change, is about 10 points bigger than the yellow neutral bar for all adults. So a lot more are saying they're doing the same. Whereas Gen Z, if you ask them, kind of what the cumulative effect of the pandemic and the death of George Floyd is, they'll say that this event is a life-changing event. It's of the magnitude of the invention of the mobile phone. So I thought this one was quite worth noting. Only final point I would make before going one slide forward is that the only category where there's no difference between all adults and boomers is personal care products like lotions and face masks, this second from the bottom. This is a category where it's both purchased more among all generations. So I'll go one slide forward. And Meg, are there any questions or comments before I jump forward to a little bit about whether behaviors are going to stick or not?
Yes, Liz Warren Peterson had a question for you that you're going to like.
Thank you. I wondered if you could talk about whether you've asked boomers to predict their behavior after vaccines are widely available. And it looks like we may be getting into something of that nature.
Oh, yeah, no, that's a great question. And let me share a couple pieces of info and intel. So we and others have been tracking vaccine related questions going back, I think, to January, everything from familiarity with the process. Can you name Who's developing them? Would you take them? And I'd highlight a couple of places where boomers stand out that I think should give us confidence that they can ratchet back after a vaccine is deployed. So first, their levels of awareness and the level of attention they're paying to vaccine news far outstrips any other generation. Second, they are very easily able to identify all of the leading companies that are developing vaccines in a way that younger adults are not. Three, their willingness to get a vaccine is considerably higher than younger adults. They're in the, if you look adults nationally in the United States, for example, about 50% today in our latest survey said that they would get them. Boomers, they would get a vaccine if it were approved by the FDA, that is. About 2/3 of boomers say that, in fact, they would get that. That's, I think, a combination of trust in their primary care physicians, concern about, the actual effects on them. So I think, they're paying attention. They're more willing to get a vaccine if and when it is available. They're closer to the front of the line, as in terms of its frontline workers, and then nursing home residents, and then probably seniors are the top 3 categories. So all of that would lead you to believe that at least the vaccine considerations could hopefully accelerate a return. However, there's a big hole for seniors, as you saw with some of the consumer confidence measures and the spending measures. Meg, are there any other questions before I show a few other slides on what's stick? And thank you again for that question.
Do you want me to share the results from the poll?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I almost forgot about that. Okay, so the results from the poll, about 2/3 of people say many activities and hobbies boomers have engaged in during the pandemic will stick post-pandemic. And about 1/3 say they will return to their pre-pandemic activities and hobbies post-pandemic. I would selfishly love to hear, Meg, even from some others, maybe later in the Q&A, kind of somebody who has each side of that coin, and maybe they could talk about their specific industry and why they think that's the case. But you always gotta like a question with a bit more of a divided answer like this.
Yep, challenge out to the webinar attendees.
Okay, well, I'll do,
Change.
pardon?
What will stick and what will change?
What will stick and what will change. All right, I'm gonna show a few slides on what will stick and what might not stick. And then I'm gonna show some really cutting edge info that frankly nobody's seen on some of the biggest and best brands among the boomer generation in the US and abroad. So, and this transitions into the prior question really well. So we've been asking people around the globe what it's gonna take them to travel more. And boomers by and large say they will travel again only when a vaccine is widely available. So that's a big kind of only. We've been looking at all sorts of different features and what people say they would want to do to travel. And I'll just go line by line here. So for example, green here, this says 73% of Germans say that they would need a vaccine to be widely available to travel. That number is 79% for boomers, 55 plus. In France, again, 62% overall versus 66%, higher by about 4 points. And then in the UK, slightly higher too, 3 to 4 points. If anything, the big gap is between younger people and the boomer generation in terms of overall levels of comfort. This is another one of my, I suppose, favorite slides, and our team put this together. But we asked about 28 hobbies, habits, and how much people missed them. And this could be relevant for some of the earlier questions. So we asked and showed a big grid among Americans. And we said, for each of the following, do you miss doing it a lot? That's that dark green bar. And that's what this is sorted by. Do you miss doing it somewhat? That's that light green bar. Do you not really miss doing it? That's the light red. Or do you not miss it at all? And so these are the top 14 activities that boomers missed. And you might maybe see more of a rebound in some of these categories. So I'd categorize these in a few different ways. So they really do miss their gym and I think group activities to the point raised just a couple moments ago. Fully 75% of boomers said that they miss going to the gym, either a lot or some. A lot miss workout classes, a key probably point of socialization. We all miss vacations right now, and that's not unique for all adults or for boomers. So about 80% say that they miss taking vacation. and then sort of going to a nice restaurant is at the top. I can remember some work that we did in the United States. We asked people to type in a box, what are you most looking forward to do when social distancing and COVID's over? And first was seeing family, second was getting a bite to eat at a restaurant. So we see a mix of gym, vacations, dining. So how about what's on the other end? Okay, well, here's 14 more activities that at least ranked lower on the I miss doing this a lot. Now, some of these activities, if you go to the bottom, maybe are activities that boomers are not doing a lot to begin with. And we have good information on that too. But I would highlight that, carpooling with others, big box stores, at least is what they say to us, still relatively high levels of missing, at least 50%, just not quite as high as vacationing, going to restaurants or bars with others. And then we have, finally, I'll show some category results, but we've been testing this across, do you miss generally brands in, alcohol or at-home fitness or clothing or financial services? And the one sort of bar that sort of stood out to me here was that many boomers say they can't live without a lot of the kind of beauty and personal care services. So 40% kind of miss and can live without versus 24% say it can't kind of wait to buy it again. So our hope is to have this by categories and activities. I'm going to show one final section, Meg, and then maybe we'll open it up. Hopefully there's some good questions or ways in which we can spur some discussion. We've been tracking a lot of different brands, 4,000 in fact around the globe, everything from the biggest big companies to the newest startups. And I wanted to note that last year, just to show how much things have changed, last year of the thousands of brands that we were tracking in the United States, these were the ones that grew the most from the start of 19 to the end of 19 in terms of purchase consideration among boomers, among that 55 to about 74 population. And you can see, I would say this list is dominated by food and beverage companies and even meal delivery. Sure, 2019 sure does feel like quite some time ago. Now, tomorrow morning, we have the 2020 list coming out, and I can tease it, and then Meg and I will pass along the whole list in our follow-up. But the biggest gainers among boomers tend to be actually household goods and cleaning type supplies, and then even pharmaceutical companies. These are the organizations that are gaining the most among seniors. And I can talk a bit more about that in the Q&A in case it's helpful. But our hope is to identify trends across generation and across time. The final slide that I'll probably show before showing some takeaways and taking some more questions is that of these thousands of brands that we've been tracking around the world, so again, we're tracking, probably doing about 20,000 interviews each day in each across the green countries here highlighted. I wanted to pull an exercise. So I wanted to look at what are the most well-known brands of the thousands that we track among boomers, among kind of that 55 plus population, and what are the brands and what are the categories that they fit in. The results sort of struck me and shocked me, in fact. So of the top 25 most known global brands, according to boomers, fully 9 of them were tech companies. 3 were major CPG or FMCG brands. 3 were automotive manufacturers. And then there were a number of financial services and apparel companies. I think Meg and I were chatting at the top. I believe the number one most known brand around the globe was Coca-Cola, the Coca-Cola company. And just at the top, whereas some of the streaming services are a bit higher for younger adults. So I thought this was at least worth noting because everything we're doing hopefully is about adding context, whether it's by demographics or by countries or groups. And boomers are picking up a lot of the technology just like a lot of younger adults. So I'm going to just close on the same slide that I opened to identify a couple of these themes. So I would say that boomers are a bit less comfortable than younger adults in many activities, and we've got many more that we're looking at and we can follow up with based on your feedback. Second, we've seen large declines in consumer confidence. I can talk about how that intersects in a lot of different ways. whether it's with wealth or health status or you name it. And the door's been opened to a lot of newer activities, whether that's different ways of getting your prescription drugs or using banks, but it's not wide open. I think it's probably, like a lot of you in companies, accelerated change, but there's still some things that remain. And then it's not the formative event in terms of boomers' life. Millennials, I think the formative event was probably the crisis in the Great Depression in 2008, Great Recession, that is. And this is the formative event for Gen Z. It is not for boomers. Doesn't mean it's not important. But maybe I'll just pause there. Meg, can I say thank you? And I was curious if anybody has any questions or comments or even compliments or criticisms, critiques, whatever might fit as appropriate.
I have a compliment. Thank you so much for doing this. I have a few more questions.
Okay.
Oh, wait, we got one in the chat. They trump me. Ramon. Ramon, I'm going to unmute you so you can chat and ask him yourself. Give me 1 second. There you go. He's got a compliment too, so.
Oh, okay.
Ramon, whenever you're ready.
I'm sorry, I think I was muted. It sounds like, hey Kyle, how are you? This is great information. It's more of a response to the earlier question around what's going to be here, what we think will stick, particularly with that demographic. I think technologies like Zoom and Microsoft Teams and other ways of connecting with each other digitally are here to stay. At some point, I do think there's a pent-up demand for travel. There's a pent-up demand for vacations, and I would expect to see that work its way back at some point in time. But the technologies that we've gotten used to over the course of the last 9 months to a year, I think they're here to stay. And so it's going to impact industries such as travel and a variety of others for some time to come. So just an opinion. And also, I think this information is fantastic. So thanks for presenting it in a simple and easy to digest manner.
Can I ask you a question, Ramon?
Yeah, sure.
How has it kind of affected broader insurance world, and particularly even kind of partnering and selling and talking to your potential customers or the third parties that might be involved in the process?
Yeah, there's we've changed how we go to market, as has everyone. Typically, this has been an environment where you're going to meet directly with advisors or producers and customers in person. And we've had to adjust all of that. And we've leaned into virtual and digital, just like everyone else. And actually, it's worked out okay for us. From a top line perspective, our numbers are not what they were pre-pandemic, but they're not as bad as we thought. From a bottom line perspective, we've reduced travel. We've reduced our physical footprint in some cities. And so it's actually been, favorable from a expense management perspective. And so, yeah, we're seeing some trends. We don't know what's going to stick for the long haul, but we've adjusted just as everyone else has on the line.
Thanks so much for sharing that. Go ahead, Meg, sorry.
Ramon, to build on Ramon's question, do you agree that online meeting technology will persist because it opened up a whole new channel for grandparents to talk to their grandchildren? I also heard an interesting insight that I wanted to bounce off of you. From my own field research with my parents, they are going to continue viewing church from Zoom because they can hear better. This older generation and boomers have better access when their churches went virtual or meetings or groups that they can communicate with. And they can literally put their headphones in and hear much clearer than it is in person. So they plan to continue that behavior. Do you have any insight into that?
Well,
will it, your opinion, do you agree with Ramon that it will persist?
No doubt. I think like probably everybody on this call, I wished I was an early investor in Zoom. But I would anticipate that growth is going to continue. If we're looking at the boomer audience in particular, I would highlight that privacy is probably a real key thing for any of those services, probably by about 20 to 25 points. boomers are concerned about the ways in which their data is going to be used. I think they're less used to sharing all of their information in a lot of ways. So I suppose this doesn't just apply to, the Microsoft Teamses and Zooms and Cisco's of the world. This, of course, applies to any industry where now data is so important. But I would expect that to be the case. And even in the company world like this, or think about all of the great webinars that the ANA is offering now in a way that maybe 2 years ago you might not have considered doing that. And now we can chat with anybody around the world in a moment's notice. So it really does open up new opportunities for people. Agreed.
The global CMOs we talked to really miss that in-person interaction. That was, someday we'll be back together. So what are demographic nuances you see in how you analyze considering pre-retired versus retired versus post-retired? And this is a question coming from Charlene Weber.
Yeah, that's another great question. And I didn't mention it at the top, but boomers are undoubtedly not monolithic or a single group. If there are 75-ish million adults in the United States, there's going to be different variants. I suppose I would highlight a couple characteristics that seem to be key in explaining a lot of behaviors here. First is your health status. So only about 35% of boomers say they're in excellent or very good health. The rest say they're in good or okay or poor health. By comparison, at least 60% of Gen Z say that they're in excellent or very good health. Now, those folks who say that they're not in as good a health, they generally have lower confidence, they're spending less, they're less engaged in the workforce, their labor force participation is just considerably lower. And then the second thing I would note is for all of the boomer audiences, we're of course looking at their personal investments, their current levels of income. And I would note something that really shocked me when COVID happened and you saw this big decline in early March. Regardless of boomers' level of assets, they all fell about the same level. So you had boomers with million plus, boomers with 50 to 100K in assets, boomers frankly with no assets. Some started higher, right? Millionaires would have been more confident to start. And then, people maybe on a little bit lower rung, they all ended up at the same place. And so if anything, the assets that somebody owns has probably been trumped by the health concerns, the stay-at-home considerations in terms of consumer confidence. And I can share that figure too. We have a great economist who's pulling together all of this info in real time.
Great. Donna, you want to build on the income question?
Well, that was very interesting, Kyle, and it leads right into mine. We are a nonprofit, and so we are doing a lot of analyzing on wealth factors and how people are feeling about their wealth factor. I didn't know if you had any information on boomers and how they are beyond just consumer confidence, how they're feeling about their retirement income, their funds, how they're set up for retirement.
Yeah, well, the positive thing, I suppose, is that the stock market is at an all-time or near all-time high. So certainly earlier in the pandemic, when you had that initial decline in March and April, you had this sort of triple whammy, I suppose, where there's health consideration, there's the stay-at-home consideration, and then there's all of my material wealth that I may need to take out in the not so distant future now is in jeopardy. So at least on the wealth consideration or the assets consideration, there's been, a decent and significant rebound there. If it's okay, I'm going to directly send you, we have a great retail investor report, across the board, shows everything from, the rise of sort of the kind of financial tech upstarts to how all the more established organizations are developing technology on their own. And we have all these great questions on motivations, concerns, broken down by, level of proficiency in investing. Yours truly, I'm no expert investor and haven't started trading in Bitcoin yet. I don't think I will, but we have a lot of good info on all those investment concerns, particularly among the youngest and the it's not the oldest, but at least the boomer audience. So I'll, if it's okay, I'm going to send you that report directly.
I would love that. Thank you very much.
Thanks for the question.
So I think we're at wrap up unless anyone has any last minute question. I'll just go ahead and start wrapping up. These slides and recording will be available and emailed to you, like I said, on Friday. If we didn't get to your question or you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me or to Kyle directly. We're on LinkedIn or the ANA Master Circle website. And we will continue to bring exclusive content like what you just saw today as part of our Global CMO Growth Council. A huge thank you to Kyle and Kara and Morning Consult for a really informative and important presentation. And thank you all for your time. We couldn't do this without you, the senior marketing leaders, and we hope you enjoyed our CMO Executive Forum. Kyle, thank you so much.
Thank you. And I guess I want to say thank you to our team, to Kara and others who helped make this great. And thank you for all the partnership. And for the next one, we're going to make it even more interactive. Is that right, Meg?
Yeah, if you have any ideas, we'd like to drill deep into certain consumer segments that often don't get the attention, like the boomers. If you have any suggestions for a customer or consumer segment that you're interested in, we've talked about LGBTQ+. We've talked about other, I can't remember the third one we talked about, but anyway, if you have any suggestions, please reach out to us and we will bring it to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And really appreciate it. We'll send the deck along.
Have a great week, everybody.